flicker. The first time I noticed the flicker, I thought it was a trick of the light. It happened as I crossed the intersection of Pine and 7th, the same route I'd taken every morning for the past 4 years on my way to the library. The winter sun was pale and diffused through a hazy sheet of low clouds, the kind of light that drained all the warmth from the world. A wind that smelled faintly of exhaust and damp pavement tugged at my coat, and I remember glancing at my watch, a habit born of chronic tardiness. 8:41 a.m. I had 9 minutes to make it to the circulation desk before Miss Crenshaw made one of her trademark passive-aggressive comments about professionalism. And then it happened. The world skipped. It wasn't an earthquake, no rumble underfoot, no cracking windows or car alarms. It was more like the frame of reality stuttered, as though someone had spliced a single second of foreign film into the reel of my life. For a brief, jarring moment, the city around me looked wrong. The street lights were different, taller, sleeker, glowing with a faint blue hue. The buildings seemed newer, shinier, and where the boarded-up coffee shop had always been, I caught a glimpse of something else, a neon-lit bakery, bustling with activity. I blinked, and everything snapped back to normal. The sensation left me queasy, like the moment you realize you've been dozing behind the wheel of a car. I stood there for a moment, staring at the blank, graffiti-scrawled windows of the coffee shop as a chill rippled down my spine. I was already late, but the thought of moving felt impossible, as though some invisible tether was holding me there, urging me to study the world for more cracks. I told myself it was nothing, a momentary lapse in focus, a lingering symptom of the stress and insomnia that had been shadowing me for weeks. Miss Crenshaw wasn't going to accept existential nausea as an excuse, so I forced my legs into motion and hurried down the street. I might have forgotten the flicker altogether if it hadn't happened again 2 days later. It was nighttime this time, and I was walking home from the grocery store with a paper bag cradled in my arms, but plastic handles biting into my palms. The city was quieter after dark, its edges blurred by the hum of streetlights and the muffled roar of distant traffic. My apartment was only 3 blocks away, and the familiar rhythm of my footsteps on the cracked sidewalk had a lulling effect, steady and comforting. And then the flicker. It was like being dumped underwater, a sudden disorientation that made my skin prickle and my vision blur. The world around me jumped, shifting into something simultaneously familiar and alien. The air smelled different, fresher, cleaner, and I could hear faint music spilling out of an open window where none should have been. The street lamp nearest to me had changed into something tall and ornate, with a brass finish that gleamed in the dark. When my vision cleared, I was standing in the same place I'd been before, but my heart was racing, my breath coming fast and shallow. It wasn't just my surroundings that had shifted. Across the street, standing under the harsh fluorescent glow of a convenience store sign, was a man I didn't recognize, but he looked just like me. No, not just like me. He was me. I don't mean in the way strangers can sometimes resemble us, a shared feature here, a vague similarity in build or posture there. No, this man was me in every sense of the word. Same face, same tired eyes, same stupid cowlick that never laid flat no matter how much gel I used. He wore a black jacket I didn't own and carried himself with an easy confidence I couldn't have faked if I tried, but there was no denying it. We locked eyes, and I froze. He didn't. He smiled at me, a slow, knowing smile that sent a jolt of fear straight through my chest. Then he turned and walked into the store without a second glance, leaving me standing there, trembling in the cold. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I kept walking, past my apartment building, past the familiar landmarks of my neighborhood, until I reached the park at the edge of the city. It was empty, the swings swaying faintly in the wind, their rusted chains creaking softly in the dark. I sank onto a bench and stared out at the empty expanse of grass, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The rational part of my brain fought to take control, offering up all the usual explanations, a coincidence, a hallucination, a dream. But the more I turned the memory over in my mind, the more certain I became that it was real. The man had been real. And he'd known me. For the next week, I saw him everywhere. At first, it was just fleeting glimpses, a reflection in a shop window, a figure disappearing into a crowd, a silhouette that lingered just a second too long at the edge of my vision. Each time, my pulse quickened, and I found myself straining to catch another glimpse, desperate to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. But then he started getting closer. I saw him at the library, sitting at one of the back tables with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. His presence was like a static charge in the air, pulling my attention no matter how hard I tried to ignore him. I saw him on the subway platform, leaning casually against a pillar as though he had all the time in the world. His eyes met mine across the crowd, and he smiled again, that same infuriating, bone-chilling smile. I even saw him outside my apartment building, standing under the glow of the street lamp and watching my window with an unsettling patience. Every time, I thought about confronting him, demanding answers, but something held me back, a deep, instinctive fear that made my stomach churn and my hands shake. It wasn't just that he looked like me. It was the way he carried himself, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through me, as though he knew things about me that I didn't even know about myself. It was on the 8th day that he finally spoke to me. I was back at the park, the place that had become my sanctuary in the chaos of the last week. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass, and the air was heavy with the promise of rain. I didn't hear him approach. One moment, I was alone on the bench, staring blankly at the horizon. The next, he was sitting beside me, close enough that I could see the faint scar on his chin, the same scar I'd gotten from falling off my bike when I was 12. "You've been avoiding me," he said. His voice was my voice, but warmer, smoother, more confident. "I don't know who you are," I said, but my throat was so tight the words barely came out. His smile widened. "Don't you?" I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but sit there frozen in place, but I couldn't move. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore, like it belonged to him now. "I think it's time we talked," he said, his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't name. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just afraid of him. I was afraid of what he might tell me. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us spoke. The silence between us thickened, pressing down on my chest like a weight. I was hyper-aware of every detail, the scrape of the wind through bare tree branches, the distant hum of traffic, the faint scent of rain on the air. And him, me, sitting so close I could feel the faint warmth radiating from his body. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was quiet, almost amused. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I don't understand," I stammered. My voice cracked, and I hated the way it made me sound small and vulnerable. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, studying me with a faint smile that never quite reached his eyes. "I told you, you already know." "I don't," I snapped, my fear momentarily giving way to frustration. "I don't know anything. I don't know why you look like me, why you've been following me. I don't even know if I stopped myself before I could say it, but the word hung heavy in the air between us. "Sane." His smile widened, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his expression, a hint of pity or maybe regret. "You're not crazy," he said, as though reading my mind. "Though I'm sure it feels that way." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "Then what's happening to me? How do you, my voice trailed off into a shaky exhale. He leaned back on the bench, stretching his arms out along the backrest like he didn't have a care in the world. It was such a casual, unself-conscious gesture, one I could never have pulled off without feeling awkward or self-aware. "I'm you," he said simply. Or, more accurately, I'm the version of you that should have existed. I blinked, his words sliding through my brain like oil, slippery, impossible to grasp. That doesn't make any sense. Sure it does, he said with a shrug. Think of your life like a path. At every fork, you make a choice. Some of them are big, some of them are small, but every choice changes the path. Maybe you chose to stay home one night instead of going to that party. Maybe you took a job you didn't really want because you were afraid of the alternative. Maybe you let someone walk away when you should have fought to keep them. The blood drained from my face, and he nodded as though he could see the realization dawning on me. Each of those choices splits the path, he continued. 1,000 little forks, 1,000 little lives. Most of them go nowhere special. But every once in a while, one of those paths leads somewhere better. I shook my head, my pulse pounding in my ears. That's just, what? Some kind of multiverse theory? Parallel worlds? That's not real. Isn't it? His tone was maddeningly calm, like a teacher leading a reluctant student to the inevitable conclusion. Then how do you explain me? I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came out. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. The smug confidence faded, replaced by something colder, sharper, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Do you ever think about it? He asked softly. The life you could have had? I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. I don't know what you mean. He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Of course you do. Everyone does. The job you didn't take. The girl you didn't call back. The dream you gave up on because it was safer to settle for something smaller. You think about it all the time, don't you? I couldn't answer. Because he was right. It wasn't that I was unhappy, exactly. My life wasn't bad. I had a steady job, a decent apartment, a few friends I saw every now and then. But there was this gnawing emptiness, this constant, low-grade ache I could never quite ignore. I tried to tell myself it was normal, that everyone felt this way sometimes. But deep down, I always wondered if I'd made a mistake somewhere along the line. If there was some other version of me out there, some better version, who had everything I didn't. And now, here he was, sitting right in front of me. Why are you here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. To show you what you're missing. The next few days were a blur. I didn't see him again, but his words followed me everywhere, echoing in my head like a broken record. I started to notice things I hadn't before, small, subtle details that made my chest tighten and my stomach churn. My apartment, with its second-hand furniture and scuffed floors, suddenly seemed unbearably cramped and shabby. The library, once my refuge, felt stifling and lifeless. Even my reflection in the mirror looked different, tired, worn, like I was seeing myself clearly for the first time. I couldn't stop thinking about the life I might have had. There was a girl once, years ago, who'd meant everything to me. Emily. She was smart and funny and beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, but I'd let her go. I'd been scared of commitment, of failure, of not being enough for her. She'd wanted more from life than I thought I could give her, so I pushed her away. And now, I couldn't stop wondering, was she part of the life he'd meant? The one I was supposed to have? I started searching for her online, something I hadn't done in years. Her name felt strange under my fingers as I typed it into the search bar, like a word from a language I'd forgotten how to speak. It didn't take long to find her. She looked happy. The photos on her profile showed her laughing, traveling, living a life that seemed impossibly bright and full. She was married now, her husband a tall, broad-shouldered man with an easy smile and kind eyes. They had a daughter, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with Emily's curls and her father's dimples. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, my chest tight with something I couldn't quite name. Regret? Jealousy? That could have been me. The flickers came more frequently after that. They were subtle at first, a strange shift in the air, a moment of déjà vu that sent a shiver down my spine. But soon, they became impossible to ignore. The city around me seemed to change in ways I couldn't explain. Streets I'd walked 1,000 times looked different, cleaner, brighter, more alive. Buildings I didn't recognize appeared in places I knew they shouldn't be. And then there were the glimpses. I started seeing him again, the other me, but not in the way I had before. It wasn't just him, standing on a street corner or sitting at the back of the library. It was his life. I saw him walking hand in hand with Emily, her laughter ringing out like a bell. I saw him sitting at a desk in a sleek, modern office, his posture confident, his smile easy. I saw him playing with the little girl from Emily's photos, his eyes alight with a joy I'd never known. It was like watching fragments of a movie, each scene more painful than the last. And the worst part? It wasn't just that he had the life I wanted. It was that he knew I was watching. The flickers stopped being brief, momentary distortions. They grew longer, more vivid, and far harder to escape. It wasn't just a second of strange streetlights or a flash of the other me walking with Emily. The flickers bled, stretching into minutes, sometimes hours, until I couldn't tell if I was awake or trapped in someone else's life. It happened one Thursday morning. I'd barely slept the night before, haunted by fragments of dreams I couldn't remember when I opened my eyes. I dragged myself through my usual routine, pouring coffee that tasted faintly metallic, tying my shoes with clumsy fingers, and stepping out into the cold dawn air. The moment I shut my apartment door, something felt off. The hallway was quiet, as it always was, but the shadows were sharper, the air heavier. I shrugged it off as another flicker, steeling myself as I took the stairs down to the lobby. They'd been happening so often lately that I'd started to accept them, like some kind of recurring migraine. If I just kept moving, I thought, they'd pass. Except this one didn't pass. When I pushed open the heavy glass door to the street, I stepped into a world that wasn't mine. It was subtle at first. The sunlight was too golden, the pavement too clean, the faint smell of garbage replaced by something sweet and earthy. I glanced up, my breath catching in my throat. The skyline was sharper, sleeker, its edges gleaming in the morning light. I tried to ground myself, clinging to familiar details. The corner store should have been there, with its faded awning and peeling posters. But in its place stood a cafe I didn't recognize, its windows bright and filled with smiling customers. Across the street, the coffee shop that had been boarded up for years was open, its interior warm and inviting. I turned back to my building, hoping to find some anchor in the strangeness, but it wasn't my building anymore. The bricks were newer, the graffiti gone, the windows gleaming as though they'd just been washed. Panic rose in my chest, and I stumbled forward, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the hum of the world around me. "Hey!" The voice snapped me out of my spiral. I turned toward it, and my stomach dropped. It was him. He was standing at the cafe's outdoor seating area, a to-go cup in his hand, his face lit with easy confidence. He wore a pressed navy suit, his hair neatly combed, and his posture spoke of someone utterly at home in his skin. For a second, I thought he was going to ignore me. He glanced up, his gaze sweeping over me like I was just another stranger on the street. But then his eyes lingered, recognition sparking in them like a struck match. His expression shifted, an almost imperceptible flicker of something unreadable. And then, to my horror, he smiled. "Morning," he called out. I froze. He tilted his head, like he was waiting for me to respond, and when I didn't, he gave a small shrug and turned back toward the cafe. He walked inside, leaving me standing there, my chest heaving and my palms clammy. It wasn't just the fact that he'd spoken to me. It was the look in his eyes. He wasn't surprised to see me. He expected me. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I wandered the streets of the Flicker, too shaken to do anything else. It was like a dream, but too vivid, too grounded. The colors were brighter, the air cleaner, the people happier. And everywhere I turned, I saw his fingerprints. I walked past a newsstand and saw his face on the cover of a magazine, smiling confidently in front of some glittering skyline. The headline read, "Architect of the Year, Daniel Mercer's Vision for the Future." My name. I ducked into a bookstore and found a shelf filled with sleek hardcover books he'd written. The titles were bold and triumphant: The Life You Deserve, Breaking Limits, Becoming Whole. Self-help, motivational nonsense. I flipped one open to a random page and felt my stomach churn as I read. You are your only obstacle. Every regret, every failure, every roadblock, it's you. And the moment you accept that, the moment you take control, you become unstoppable. I slammed the book shut and shoved it back on the shelf, my hands shaking. This wasn't just some alternate version of my life. It was better. He was better. Smarter, happier, more successful. Everything I ever wanted to be, he already was. And I hated him for it. The flicker didn't fade that time. I went home, if you could call it that, and found my apartment transformed. It wasn't the dingy little box I'd been living in. The furniture was sleek and modern, the walls painted in warm, inviting tones. A flat-screen TV dominated one wall, and a shelf lined with awards and framed photos filled another. I stared at the photos, my stomach sinking. They were of him, of me, standing with Emily, her arm wrapped around his waist, her face glowing with joy. In one photo, they were on a beach somewhere, the sunset painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold. In another, they stood in front of a massive house with a little girl between them, her gap-toothed smile as bright as the sun. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I stumbled back, knocking over a vase I hadn't seen. It shattered on the floor, the sound sharp and jarring, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. This wasn't my life. This wasn't my home. And yet, it felt familiar. Like I belonged here. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the broken vase, the pictures, the gleaming furniture. Eventually, I got to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I left. The streets were quiet, the city bathed in the golden light of early evening. I wandered aimlessly, hoping that the flicker would end, that I'd wake up in my own world, in my own life, no matter how small and broken it was. But it didn't end. And then I saw him again. He was sitting on a park bench, his suit jacket folded neatly beside him, his sleeves rolled up as he scrolled through something on his phone. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was desperation, or rage, or something else entirely. But I marched up to him, my hands clenched into fists, and stopped directly in front of him. He looked up, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He raised an eyebrow, his expression calm and almost amused. "You came to me, remember?" "No," I snapped. "You've been following me. You've been haunting me." My voice cracked, and I took a shaky breath. "You've taken everything." He tilted his head, his gaze sharp and unflinching. "I didn't take anything. You gave it up." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You don't belong here," he continued, his tone measured, almost gentle. "This isn't your life. It's mine." "Then why am I here?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why are you doing this to me?" He stood, his presence towering, suffocating. He leaned in close, his voice low and filled with something dark and unreadable. "Because you need to understand," he said. "You'll never get this back. No matter how much you want it, no matter how much you regret." And then he was gone. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my own apartment. The walls were cracked, the furniture mismatched, the air heavy with the faint smell of mildew. But something had changed. Because now, every time I looked in the mirror, I saw him. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me. When the flicker stopped, I thought I'd escaped. I thought I was free. But I wasn't. I didn't see him for weeks after that night in the park. The world felt normal again, or as normal as it could after everything I'd seen. My apartment was back to its usual drab self, the streets were familiar, and the people around me moved with the indifferent rhythm of the city. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was subtle at first, easy to dismiss, a shadow that lingered too long, a voice in the crowd that sounded eerily familiar. But as the days stretched into weeks, the cracks began to show. The first crack appeared in the mirror. It was a Thursday morning, cold and gray, and I was getting ready for work. I was brushing my teeth, staring blankly at my reflection, when I noticed it. My reflection didn't move. I froze, the toothbrush still in my hand. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. But then my reflection smiled. Not a normal smile, a slow, crooked grin that didn't belong to me. It was the smile he always wore, the one that sent chills down my spine. I staggered back, the toothbrush clattering to the floor, and the moment I blinked, it was gone. My reflection moved normally again, mirroring my every action, but I couldn't shake the image of that smile. It stayed with me all day, lurking at the edge of my thoughts like a shadow I couldn't escape. The cracks grew deeper after that. I started noticing changes, little things that shouldn't have been there. A book on my shelf I didn't remember buying. A shirt in my closet I'd never worn. One morning, I woke up to find the time on my alarm clock flashing 7:42, even though I always set it for 6:30. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, maybe even some kind of delayed mental breakdown. But the changes kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. One night, as I was scrolling through my phone, I came across a photo I didn't remember taking. It was of me, him, sitting in the park, the same park where he'd spoken to me. The date on the photo was from 3 days earlier, but I hadn't been to the park since the night I confronted him. I stared at the photo, my chest tightening, my mind racing. It wasn't possible. None of this was possible. But it was happening. The nightmares started soon after. In the dreams, I was always in his life. I stood in his apartment, our apartment, but it wasn't mine. The furniture was too sleek, the air too clean, the windows too big. I saw Emily, her face glowing with the kind of joy I'd only ever imagined. I heard the sound of a little girl's laughter, light and musical, and felt a sharp pang of longing so deep it nearly brought me to my knees. But the dreams always turned dark. I would hear a knock at the door, soft at first, then louder, more insistent. When I opened it, he was standing there, his smile sharp and cruel. "This isn't for you," he would say, his voice low and venomous. "You don't belong here." And then the world would dissolve around me, collapsing like a house of cards, and I would wake up drenched in sweat, my chest heaving, my heart pounding like a war drum. It happened every night. It wasn't just in the dreams anymore. The life I'd seen in the flicker, the better life, started bleeding into mine. I'd hear Emily's voice sometimes, faint and distant, as though she were calling my name from another room. I'd catch glimpses of the little girl running through the halls of my apartment building, her laughter echoing off the walls. At work, I'd find notes scrawled in the margins of books I was shelving, messages in handwriting that looked disturbingly like mine. "This isn't real. You don't belong here. It's too late." I tried to tell myself it was just stress, my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew the truth. The cracks were getting wider. The worst of it happened one Friday night. I'd spent the evening trying to distract myself, binge watching old TV shows and scrolling aimlessly through social media. But the feeling of wrongness hung over me like a storm cloud, growing heavier with each passing hour. At around midnight, I went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face, hoping it would clear my head. That's when I saw him again. He was in the mirror, standing behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering, but the bathroom was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, he was still there, his eyes locked on mine. "Stop running," he said, his voice calm and steady, but it didn't come from the mirror. It came from behind me. I turned again, and this time he was there, standing in the doorway, his presence filling the small bathroom like a storm cloud. "You can't hide from this," he said, taking a step closer. I stumbled back, my hands gripping the edge of the sink. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice cracking. He tilted his head, his expression almost pitying. "You still don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" He took another step forward, and I realized there was no escape. The bathroom was too small, the walls closing in around me. "This is my life," he said. "You're just a fragment. A mistake. You're not supposed to be here." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I'm real," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. He smiled, that same infuriating, bone-chilling smile, and shook his head. "You were real. But now," he trailed off, his eyes dark and unreadable. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He leaned in close, so close I could feel his breath on my skin. "You know exactly what I mean." And then he reached out, his hand brushing against mine, and the world dissolved. When I woke up, I was somewhere else. The room was dark, the air cold and heavy. I tried to sit up, but my body felt wrong, sluggish, like I was moving through water. I looked around, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, and realized I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in his. The sleek furniture, the warm walls, the massive windows, it was all there, just as I'd seen it in the flickers. But it wasn't bright or inviting anymore. It was empty, the air thick with silence. I stumbled to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me, and made my way to the window. The city outside was dark, its edges blurred and unfamiliar, like a painting left out in the rain. And then I saw the reflection. It wasn't mine. It was his. The reflection didn't blink. It didn't flinch or follow my movements. I raised a trembling hand to my face, and my reflection didn't respond. It just stood there, staring back at me, his face wearing that infuriating smile I'd come to dread. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. "This isn't happening." I staggered back from the window, nearly tripping over the edge of the low coffee table behind me. My chest felt tight, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The air in the room was thick and stifling, and I couldn't tell if it was my panic or something worse, something wrong. The reflection moved. Not like me, its movements were deliberate, controlled, and not tethered to mine. It stepped forward in the glass, its face twisting into a look of something that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't pity either. "This is what you wanted," the reflection said, its voice clear as a bell but not coming from the glass. It came from everywhere, reverberating in the corners of the room. I choked on the words. Yes, you did. I turned to run, desperate to get away from the room, the voice, the reflection, him. But as I rounded the corner, I came face to face with myself again. Or at least, the version of me I'd been seeing in the flickers. He was leaning against the doorframe to what I assumed was the bedroom, his arms crossed, his expression calm, like this was all some kind of inevitable conclusion. He didn't need to speak this time, his eyes said everything. You can't keep doing this. I shouted, but I wasn't even sure what I meant. My voice was hoarse, raw, like I'd been screaming for hours. He straightened, unfolding his arms, and took a step toward me. I backed away instinctively, but my legs felt heavy, like they were sinking into the floor. This isn't your life anymore, he said, his tone cold, almost bored. It hasn't been for a long time. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed, a sound laced with frustration, and gestured around the room. Look around. You don't belong here. You never did. I glanced at the room, the modern furniture, the framed photos, the soft, muted colors. It wasn't mine. It had never been mine. But it felt familiar. Then why am I here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You already know the answer to that. The flickers, the visions, the cracks, they weren't accidents. They weren't some strange quirk of reality. They were a warning. Somewhere along the line, I'd gone wrong. I'd taken the wrong path, made the wrong choices. And now, I was paying the price. You've been living on borrowed time, he said, his voice almost gentle now. This life was never meant to be yours. It's mine. And you've been clinging to it like a parasite. That's not true, I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Isn't it? He stepped closer, his presence suffocating, filling the room like a black hole. Think about it. Have you ever really felt like you belonged? Like you were real? His words hit me like a punch to the gut because I had thought about it. I'd thought about it every day of my life, the nagging sense that something wasn't quite right, that I was living a life that didn't fit. It's not your fault, he said, his tone softening. It's just how it works. Some paths lead to nowhere. Some people, they just get lost. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. No. I'm real. I'm real, and I'm here, and you can't just... He cut me off with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You think this is about me? About what I want? He gestured to the room, to the world outside the window. This life isn't big enough for both of us. One of us has to go. And it's not going to be me. I don't know what I expected him to do, but it wasn't this. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the bedroom door with a flourish, like he was inviting me into a hidden part of the world. You want answers? He asked. Go ahead. Take a look. I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to turn and run, to leave this place and never look back. But I couldn't. Something, curiosity, fear, desperation, pulled me forward. I walked past him, my steps slow and unsteady, and pushed open the bedroom door. The room beyond wasn't a bedroom. It was a void. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all of it was gone, replaced by an infinite expanse of swirling gray mist. Shapes moved within it, vague and indistinct, like shadows without a source. And then I saw them. Fragments of my life, scattered like broken glass in the mist. There was the coffee shop I used to go to every morning, the one that had closed down years ago. There was Emily, her face lit with the warm glow of candlelight as we sat across from each other at a table I didn't recognize. There was the little girl running through a sunlit park, her laughter echoing like a distant memory. And then I saw myself, or versions of myself. One of them was younger, his eyes bright with ambition as he stood in a crowded lecture hall. Another was older, sitting in an office that looked nothing like the library, his face calm and content. And another was him, standing with Emily and the little girl, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. I reached out, desperate to touch them, to pull them closer, but they dissolved into mist the moment my fingers brushed against them. "This is what you wanted," his voice said from behind me, and I turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. "This is what you could have had." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "Why are you doing this to me?" "I'm not doing anything," he said, his tone almost pitying. "You did this to yourself." The world began to collapse. The mist surged forward, swallowing the fragments, the shapes, the shadows. The floor beneath me trembled, the edges of the room dissolving into nothingness. "You don't belong here," he said again, his voice calm and steady. "It's time to let go." I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The mist closed in around me, cold and suffocating, and I felt myself falling, tumbling into the void. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in my apartment. But it wasn't the same. The walls were gray and cracked, the furniture broken and rotting. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. I stumbled to my feet, my body aching, and made my way to the window. The city outside was dark, its streets empty, its buildings crumbling into ruin. And then I saw him. He was standing on the street below, looking up at me with that same infuriating smile. "This is your life now," he said, though his voice wasn't coming from the street. It was inside my head, as clear and sharp as if he were standing right next to me. And then he turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the shadows. The city didn't feel like mine anymore. It was quiet now, unnaturally so, like someone had turned the volume of the world all the way down. The streets were deserted, the buildings looming dark and hollow, their windows staring like dead eyes. Even the air felt different, heavy and stagnant, as though the place itself had forgotten how to breathe. I wandered aimlessly for hours, maybe days, it was impossible to tell. Time didn't flow here the way it had before. The sky never changed, always locked in a dull, overcast haze that pressed down on me like a physical weight. I didn't see him again, but I felt him everywhere. In the silence. In the shadows. In the way the city seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, its streets folding in on themselves, trapping me in an endless labyrinth. The worst part wasn't the emptiness. It wasn't the decay or the suffocating silence. It was the mirrors. They were everywhere. Windows, puddles, shards of broken glass, they all reflected a version of me I didn't recognize. A version with sunken eyes and a hollow smile. A version whose every movement felt deliberate, controlled, as though it were biding its time. I tried to avoid them, but it was impossible. No matter where I went, they found me. And every time I looked, the reflection seemed closer. I don't know how long I wandered before I heard the voice again. It came from behind me, low and familiar, like an old friend whispering a secret. "You're not supposed to be here." I spun around, my heart hammering, but the street was empty. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice echoing off the crumbling buildings. The voice chuckled softly, the sound curling around me like smoke. "This isn't your life. You know that. Then why am I here?" I demanded, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. The voice didn't answer. Instead, the shadows around me seemed to ripple, and I felt the air grow colder. And then I saw him. He stepped out of the darkness, his presence as calm and assured as ever. He wasn't smiling this time. His face was serious, almost solemn, and his eyes held a weight I couldn't describe. "This is your last chance," he said. "Last chance for what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "To let go." He gestured to something behind me, and when I turned, I saw the door. It was plain and unremarkable, standing in the middle of the empty street. The wood was old and weathered, the paint peeling away to reveal the bare surface beneath. I turned back to him, my confusion written plainly on my face. "What is this?" "The way out," he said simply. I took a step toward the door, my legs trembling beneath me. "What happens if I go through?" "You leave all of this behind." His voice was steady, but there was something in his expression I couldn't read. "You stop chasing what doesn't belong to you. You move on." "And if I don't?" He held my gaze, his eyes sharp and unflinching. "Then you stay. Here. Forever." I looked back at the door, my chest tightening. The way out. It seemed so simple, so final. But there was something he wasn't saying. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why are you doing this to me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step closer, his presence looming over me like a storm cloud. "This isn't personal," he said, his tone calm but cold. "You're just an echo. A fragment of a life that went nowhere. And you're clinging to something that was never yours to begin with." "I'm not an echo," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. He tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Aren't you?" I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was fear. I stepped through the door. For a moment, the world dissolved around me. The city, the silence, the suffocating weight of it all, it vanished, replaced by a blinding white light that burned behind my eyes. And then I was back. Back in my apartment. At first, I thought it was over. The air smelled stale and familiar, the faint hum of the radiator filling the silence. I stood there for a long moment, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that any second the cracks would reappear. But they didn't. I was alone. The city outside my window was just as I'd left it, imperfect, alive, messy in all the ways that felt real. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. It was over. But something wasn't right. The changes were subtle at first. A book on my shelf that hadn't been there before. A photo on my wall of a trip I didn't remember taking. The faintest scent of perfume lingering in the air, something floral and familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. And then there was the reflection. It moved when I moved, mirrored every gesture, every blink. But there was something in its eyes, something knowing, something that didn't belong to me. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was nothing. But every time I caught my reflection, the feeling grew stronger, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. And then, one day, it smiled. Not a normal smile. His smile. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I ever escaped, or if I'm still trapped in some broken fragment of reality. All I know is that the reflection is getting stronger. And every day, I feel myself fading. Fading into the shadows. Fading into him.